The underdog. The long shot. The nobody from nowhere, never gonna happen 100 to 1 shot. We know something about that. We're with you every step of the way.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Thursday 30. We got a roundtable of athletes and former athletes with us today. We have Kamani, graduated in 2019, Ava, a two-sport athlete, Amira from the women's basketball team, and Jaman, or Doc, if you will, from the men's basketball team. Y'all, it's awesome to have you here, and always it's great to have John here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll start with the current student athletes. Ava, it's quite a big jump to go from one Friday having class and being in the middle of a soccer season, and then all of a sudden you're headed back to California.
In fact, I actually didn't go back to California until May 21st. I actually surprised my family because it was my brother's birthday. And I was torn because I just wanted to go home this entire time to see my family, but also I didn't want to, risk getting sick or getting my family sick by going on the plane home. So I was actually in King, North Carolina, with my boyfriend, staying with his family because I've known them for a while. So yes, it was definitely odd. Definitely an odd transition.
So I would like to hear, from everyone here about their experience, the shock, and how quickly it happened regarding, school shutting down when it comes to dealing with COVID-19.
For me, I would say it was real different going from being in school every day to just in the next week thinking you would be on spring break for just a week, I guess. And then we haven't been to school since. So I got to find different ways to work out and stay in shape other than just lose focus. And it's harder because other than just having access to a gym all the time, you always got to look for different spots and make up your own workouts and stuff like that.
I would say for me, it definitely hit me because we were actually on our way to our game for playoffs, and it didn't hit me how bad COVID was until we were literally on our way to our shoot around, and Coach Mock, she came to the back of the bus and she was like, "We got to go home." And it hit us because we were like, man, we feel like we were going somewhere. After the Charleston Southern game, I really felt like we were about to do something and make a statement. So it kind of hit us really hard. And then knowing that the seniors, they didn't know that the last game they played was going to be their last game, and we felt bad for them. To just having that uncertainty really hit us hard and not being able to finish our season. But also, I think for me, coming home, it has been weird on an aspect of training because it's I'm not used to being in my driveway shooting on my goal. I'm always in the gym, having to adapt to different workouts. It definitely is different. And as far as school-wise, being online, I love the face-to-face interaction. That's just how I learn best. So having to be online hours at a day staring at a computer, I don't know how many times I've had headaches already just from being online for classes, but it was definitely a shift and very different.
I will say I don't have to deal with being a student athlete anymore, so no training for me. But having to shift from working in person at a prosecutor's office to working online definitely poses significant challenges, because you can't go to court or you can't, interact with victims or targets or defendants and that type of stuff remotely. It's very difficult. And I am going to grad school right now too. So Zoom online has been definitely interesting. But yeah, I don't think it's as bad for me as I thought, just because the remote access has been so easy to use, and it's been very reliable so far. So not very many complaints over here.
Okay, Matt, you got anything?
No, I think we're good. Have a great day, guys. No, of course, yeah. So when get through, and you realize that this is going to be a longer process than just, it's going to be a week or 2 weeks, that this is going to be through at least the summer, and it's going to impact how we move into next season, and Kamani, is going to affect the next months and potentially years of your life. What's that shift like from from almost just like a complete change to your everyday? I mean, we talked about like that moment when you felt like, okay, this is a change, but now it's a more permanent change in the way that both athletics and us in our outside lives handle things.
The biggest change I would see is basically getting to school over the summer, because last year, my first year coming in, I came June 2nd, and we had like a 1 week break in July and came right back. So, and then I think y'all know, but we added like 5 new people. So it's like, it's gonna be kind of harder to get like the team bonding as quick as we did last year when I came in, me and Trent and AJ, which were 2 other freshmen last year. But the way our team is, I think it should be like not as hard as saying, like I'm saying it's gonna be hard, but it will be easy at the same time because the way that we are as a team, we get along pretty well. And another big thing I think is like the big access to the weight rooms, and I guess like being around each other as much. That's what I would say would impact us the most.
For me, lacking the team atmosphere and coaching atmosphere made me realize how much discipline that I really needed to perpetuate basically in all areas of my life. Whether that was with school, because I wasn't face-to-face and I didn't necessarily have a set time for school. I caught myself just totally procrastinating like throughout the day and doing things totally last minute. And I also caught myself slipping up on workouts just because, well, there wasn't things open, and just because I wasn't around that team environment who supported me in the same way. So I really had to teach myself how to do things on my own.
I would say for me, not being around my teammates as much, because we're literally around each other every day, all day, was very different. So I know as seniors are making it a point, especially with our big coaching change, teammates leaving, and we're getting new teammates. So, and new coaches as well. We're trying to make it a point, like every week we have a team Zoom on Wednesday. And we'll spend, 30 minutes to an hour, maybe even more on there, just doing different activities and talking about things. And then seniors, we call each other. Well, we try to make it a point to call our other teammates, maybe 2 or 3 people a week to stay in contact, because we don't have that everyday connection like we normally would. I would say that's the biggest difference for me, but I'm still just as busy here as I was at school, because that's just, I love the busyness. I have to keep myself busy.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think being self-motivated is definitely going to be challenging for the rest of the year, because you don't have a boss or a coach or your teammates holding you accountable every second of the day. But yeah, I think I also like to stay busy. So even when I'm not doing something work related or school related, I'm training for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, or I'm trying to, spend time with my little brothers and make sure that they have everything that they need, because they're also doing school on Zoom as well. So I think just finding different ways to occupy your time when you don't have to do tasks directly related to yourself is important.
Now, not only have we been impacted tremendously by the COVID-19, we've also been impacted by a lot of social things that have happened in this same time frame. And we are seeing a lot of awareness happening due to the Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd death. And I feel that everybody in here, everybody that's listening, everybody in the nation has been impacted by it. Have you guys been impacted by these traumatic incidents?
Yes, I have, because from where I live in Richmond, it's like a big type. We having a lot of protests right now. Mostly are violent. Some are peaceful, but it's like I want to participate in some, but it's like the way I have to think, I got to keep myself safe for me going back to school. Like, I'm all for the protesting, and I feel like they have the right to protest because until we get equality, I really don't know any other way that would be to get there because we've been trying for years now. And for me, it's just like I got to keep focused. And even though everything that's going on around me, I want change for myself. But as me being a student athlete, I also got to keep my head on straight and stay smart with what I'm doing.
Going off your point, by supporting the movement, I'm personally like in no way endorsing like the violence, the looting that's happening, but I know the founding principles of the movement of itself like isn't either. I think that the looting is doing more harm than good for the movement because it's putting a bad name. It's very sad that businesses, especially small businesses, are being destroyed because of the chaos going around. But at the end of the day, I think the racial injustice is the real issue here. Buildings can be rebuilt, but like the life of an innocent man cannot. His family and friends cannot reverse that pain. So in a sense, I'm not necessarily excusing the chaos that's going on, but it's what's getting attention. And I think attention and action really needs to be put in place.
So I would say I've definitely been affected by the death of George Floyd for a multitude of reasons. The first reason being that I am Black and I work in a prosecutor's office. A prosecutor's office that is notorious for being racist or for being at the forefront of various injustices as it relates to Black people. For example, the Central Park 5. Yeah, I work at that prosecutor's office. So, you know, it's definitely been challenging for me in that regard, and it has forced myself as well as my colleagues to have uncomfortable conversations at work about racial inequality, and even, you know, looking in the mirror basically and saying, you know, how we have dropped the ball as a law enforcement or law agency and how we could do better and how we, you know, encourage the type of behavior that we saw in the video that resulted in George Floyd's death, and how we as an office, as a collective, and, you know, as people of color separately can work together to ensure that this type of thing no longer happens. And we're also trying to come up with solutions as to how we can, you know, ensure that people are safely and effectively protesting. As Ava said, you know, the looting has definitely been something that has hurt the movement in a sense, but some people also look at it as necessary, you know, because it is civil unrest. And so our office has began to take steps to deal with things such as not prosecuting people that are protesting, which is a big step because, you know, that's usually the worry, as Doc said, is, you know, the danger and the dangers associated with protesting because you might be arrested or abused by the police. So yeah, definitely been affected. It's been an interesting ride so far, and we definitely have a lot of things to fix before we can say we solve these issues. So.
And along with everybody else's points, I definitely agree with it. I've had my dad, my cousins, my uncles, we have had a protest in my tiny town as well. Very conservative town, so it's not as many people. But I think like everybody else said, I don't condone the looting, but there comes to a point where how long do you expect somebody to ask nicely and be peaceful? But like I said, I don't condone it, but you know, what do you expect at the end of the day? But also there are peaceful protests, like we can't forget that, and who's doing the looting, you know, how the media portrays it to us, you know, how media portrays everything to us says a lot, and I think that's what we have to pay attention to as well. They show us what they want to show us. So I think that's important as well. Like I said, we've had team Zooms, and we were talking about the other day, I think a big part of this is educating yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just flip on the TV every day and watch it hours on end and expect that to give you the truth, and that's all you need. I do a lot of just reading myself, listening to different things, watching different movies to keep myself educated on things, to make sure I'm not just getting one biased story. And I think that's what a lot of people lack, is just education and knowledge on it. And knowledge has, a great power. It's a great tool that a lot of people, don't see it as a tool. But I think it's good when we keep ourselves up to date on what the real issues are. And I would say, as far as like platforms, especially, the women's basketball team, we made a video as well. I think that's important. People who have platforms need to make it a point to say where they stand. And I think that was important for us. We came up with, as a team, not the coaches, it was us. Like, we wanted to use our platform to say, like, we don't stand for inequality and injustice. And I think a lot of people wouldn't do that just because they are simply scared of the backlash. And I think right now is an important time to be uncomfortable. And a lot of people aren't okay with being uncomfortable, but it comes a time where, in order to move forward and get better at things, you have to feel uncomfortable, whether that's, with civil rights, basic human rights, or even in our sports, like every day. Like, how good are we going to be if we just keep staying comfortable? So that's my outtake on it. Definitely has an effect on me. And we were talking about in the Zoom as well, just like, I don't think people understand the fear that, people of color have stepping outside of their homes each and every day. Like, I know for me, every day my dad goes to work, he goes to work extremely early, like 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, the past couple of weeks, I've been catching myself, I'll hear his alarm, and I'm just praying, like, Lord, keep him safe. Because there's been times when my dad's just driving home, gets stopped by a cop, and gets searched for no reason at all. It's ridiculous. But, I think people need to understand that there is fear there, and that, they need to step out of that uncomfortableness and help for a greater good.
I definitely agree. One of the things that I spoke to a friend about was that, brought up the looting thing, and the looting thing usually overtakes the entire root of the issue, which was injustice. And one of the things that I also made sure to make a point of is that in history, when we have had situations where there's been some type of social or racial injustice, there have been protests, and there have also been violent acts and looting. You're going to get those types of emotions from people who are giving you the energy that has been pent up from a lot of different situations, all based on the initial sin of racism. And so one of the things that I always talk to people about is, please do not let the looting and the robbing and the stealing get away from the initial fact, which is this man's life was taken away from him. He was taken away from his family without going through any type of due process, and it was just wrong. And so for me personally, as a Black man, one of the things that and Amir, I'll jump on your point with that, is the fear that a lot of African Americans have when they go out and they're going just to their day-to-days. You have no idea what's going to happen, and when you engage with police officers and authority, it's a different feeling than I think it is for our white counterparts. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys was, what have been some of your situations, circumstances that, like your dad has been through? Have any of you guys ever dealt with that? And what was your response? What was your feeling after that happened?
Oh, well, it started kind of young for me, because I remember it was one instance where I was just going back home from bowling with my dad, and we were right around the corner, and my dad got pulled, and it was basically for no reason. My dad's ex-wife cop wouldn't tell him why. He just asked to search his car. And I was confused. I didn't know anything about law rights. I was like 8, I guess. So I just stepped out. And I seen him put my dad in handcuffs and sit him on the ground. And it was people that pulled up beside us and they asked were we all right, did they want to stay? But I didn't understand why. But now me being older, I kind of got why, because basically it was no reason to search the car. It was nothing in the car. And my dad was basically being profiled. And it was another instance where it was me. It was, I think me and my friends were playing basketball at the park. And I guess it was something that happened around the neighborhood, and we were all like profiled for doing it, basically. And they didn't put us in cuffs or anything, but basically we were being accused of something we never did. And it's just like, it's kind of scary walking around and seeing a cop and you get nervous. Like, I shouldn't see a uniform and get nervous. It's like, it makes me, I wouldn't say not like him, but it makes me lose a lot of respect for him, because I feel like I'm always being racially profiled, no matter how I present myself, because I think I carry myself the right way. But it's like, it doesn't work at all. So it's getting real frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely started early for me as well. Growing up in New York City and what, people describe as the hood. Obviously, you see police brutality on almost a daily basis. I've seen firsthand the police hit my friends, like slap them, abuse them, put them in cuffs. I've been put in a headlock by the police before. More recently, I think there was one time I was in the car with a bunch of friends of mine, and the detectives in an unmarked car pulled me over. And, usually when you get pulled over, they just pull you over, walk up to the window, that type of thing. But in this particular instance, they pulled me over, and from their car, on the megaphone, I guess, they told me to wind all the windows down, turn my car off, and put the keys on the roof, and unlock all the doors. So I was sitting there like, whoa, this does not sound good at all, right? And they surrounded my car, literally, like, from front, side, back, every angle you could possibly think of. A whole bunch of detectives surrounded my car, shining flashlights in our face, basically doing the same thing that happened to Doc. They're like, where are you guys coming from? Are you from the local projects? So-and-so happened over here. We know you guys are responsible. You in the back, you look familiar. Isn't your name so-and-so? Aren't you in this gang? Step out the car. So I was frustrated, a lot more than I probably should have in that instance. And you feel embarrassed. Like, you definitely feel embarrassed when it's all going on, because people are walking by, recording, screaming "World Star," all type of stuff. So it's kind of disheartening when you don't really know how to react, and you have a lot of pent up anger and aggression, and you want to react violently, because before anything, you are a man, or you are a human being. And you feel like in that instance, they're trying to strip you of your manhood and your identity. Even the way that they were talking to you, like, they're calling us boys, like, oh, your dad keeps you, on the straight or narrow, right, boy? Like, it's really weird. It's really weird. It definitely makes you feel uncomfortable. And you definitely are angry after it happens. So that's my experience.
I kind of forgot about this, but when I was in first grade, I had a teacher who kind of separated us by race, and she assumed that I was at an emerging reading level because she assumed I had less education, and that, like, I wasn't, that we weren't as financially stable. And my mom had a parent meeting with her, conference with her, and she was wondering, like, why I was put in this emerging reading level group. And I got tested, and I ended up being in the top 1% of the nation with my reading comprehension levels. Because I was reading, like, Harry Potter books home, and I was, like, just turned 6 in first grade. I totally forgot about that, because, like, I didn't think anything of it. Like, I don't know, I was just reading, I was just in class. But the fact that my education and future, my perception of myself could have been so altered in such a negative way, it's kind of scary.
I'm angry right now. To be honest with you, like, I feel that we've all gone through some type of training by our family members as far as on how to deal with and engage the police. I know that my family did, my aunts, my uncles, my dad, my mom, they all told me the same thing, which was if you were ever engaged by the police, and this is not how mainstream society paints that picture. Usually the police are supposed to be the people that are coming to the rescue. They're supposed to help you. They're supposed to save. And for African Americans, for people of color, it's a different story, and it's a different type of unspoken rules that you got to go through in order to make sure that you come out either with your life, or you come out with your life not ruined. And that's one thing that I taught a lot of folks about, was of how I was raised. If I get pulled over by a cop, comply, over comply, so that they don't take anything, because nothing worth, your pride is not worth your life, is what they told me. And I'm a prideful guy. And so if complying gets me home, that's what my parents told me to do. And I had one particular situation where recently too, where my wife and I got pulled over. And my wife is white. So she didn't go through the same training as I did. And so she didn't understand why we were getting pulled over. I knew why we were getting pulled over, but she didn't understand why we were getting pulled over. And so she asked questions, which in my mind, I'm thinking, please stop talking, because you were going to make it worse for me. And she didn't understand because of how she was always taught to engage the police. You can have a conversation with them. She was having a conversation. I've never seen that before in my life. Okay. The main thing that happens with us was we tell them, we give them our stuff, we give them our license. If they ask to search the car based on whatever weird thing they say they see, whether it's grass on the floor, which could be mistaken for marijuana, or you fit the description, which we see all the time. Those types of situations, are ways for them to just make sure that you are going down, like you said, that straight and narrow. But they wouldn't do that with anybody else except for people of color. I mean, I'm sure that they do it up from time to time, but I felt like, for me, it was a long process that you had to go through in order just to tell me that my tags were about to expire. You understand what I'm saying? So for me, I had to educate my wife on the difference, on how being brought up as a Black man, going through that training, and my parents preparing me to be able to comply and engage with police officers by making sure that I came home alive and that my life wasn't ruined because they put me in the system. And now I can't actually thrive in the white America that is. And so that was, my situation with them as well. Anybody else got anything?
I was just gonna speak on the fact, because my dad is Black and my mom is white, so I see it in ways, whereas if I'm with one parent and not the other, the way that we're treated in public when I'm with my mom, it's totally different, which is crazy. And I've seen that ever since, I've been little. When I'm with my dad, it's very different. I can just name an instance. The other day, my dad was in the store and he was going to buy a bench so I could bench press and all that in our basement. And it was the last one on display. And he was in the store and the guy was telling him basically he couldn't buy it because it was on display. You know what I'm saying? Like, my dad was willing to give him the money, pay for it. No, because it's on display. And so my dad came home, told my mom, and as you said, John, my parents, my dad has to educate my mom at times, just because, not that she doesn't understand, but she just didn't come up the same way that he did. But all she had to do was, she didn't even have to make an appearance in the store. All she had to do was call and say, I want that bench, that you have on display. And to me, it's just ridiculous, like just little things like that. And also when I've been with friends, some of my Black friends, it's like we get followed around in the store. But if I'm with friends that are white, oh, it's nothing like that. But I think people have to base it off of, for me, who I'm with, because my skin is so fair. A lot of people don't really know if I'm white or if I'm Black or, mixed. So for me, my stories are a little different, but I definitely do see it.
My mom is like white, and my dad's actually from Nigeria, and he immigrated like in his early 20s. And he didn't actually really understand that racism was really a thing in America. He just saw it as a land of opportunity. And it was actually my mom who had to educate him, saying like, you can't do certain things. Like you have to, put your hands like on the steering wheel when a cop comes by. She had to like lay it down, and my dad didn't understand because obviously he's just living his life, not harming anybody. Really like respectable man, awesome man. And another example of how just, I guess, systematic racism has affected us was through like, what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. Basically predatory lending. That's the word. Yes.
Sure.
Basically, I can't go into detail because it's personal to our family, but it's really, really affected us. And I have two other brothers, and like my parents pay for all of us to go to school. So it's already hard as it is, to manage a family of 5. But we've just been set back because of this predatory lending that a lot of time targets people of color or obviously African Americans. It's more annoying. So yeah, yeah.
You talked about it a little bit, as far as the nonchalantness of racism today. All right, the difference is compared to the 50s and 60s that the hate's been covered up, and they found a way to systematically apply it to the rules and laws of today. And it's a great platform to hide behind without being perceived on paper as racist. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you guys is how do you feel about and obviously we see systematic racism a little bit differently, but how have you been able to engage with your white peers, if you have been able to engage with your white peers? And has it jumped up a little bit since these incidents? And what have those conversations been like?
So far, me having not a lot of white peers, but a good amount of them. I guess even before the situations, I felt it was always love there, and that's the main reason that I look for is love. Basically, it's not anything about what are you doing for me. It's basically if you genuinely want to be like around me or something like that. And I always can tell it was never any type of racist hate between me and any of my white peers. But this happened, and it's like, even if I guess it wouldn't make a difference between our relationship, it's kind of weird, like even going around their family, knowing everything that's going on. It's like I can tell it's always a sense of trying to make things better. It's like trying to act as if they're trying not to be racist, even though they're not, if you understand what I'm saying. It's like, I never looked at my white friends as racist in any type of way, but I guess them trying to make sure that I know they're not racist, it just makes it a little weird, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, definitely. So I feel now more than ever that some of my white peers are, like Doc said, going out of their way to make sure that I feel supported, that I have a voice and that more than anything, they aren't racist. You know, to clarify anything that I might have perceived to be a blurred line. Um, so you know, I think also they've been helping to facilitate a lot of uncomfortable conversations at my workplace, and you know, to again point a finger at themselves and say like we've dropped the ball in this regard and we could have done better here and we're going to do better here. Um, so I definitely think the engagement has been different. Um, that doesn't necessarily mean that it might be genuine, but there's definitely been a shift. And I guess I'm looking forward to seeing how long this continues, whether it's just a moment or a movement. So,
Based on that point, my fear is that the Black Lives Matter movement is like only being discussed largely due to the fact that's a trend on social media and not because it's like a real current issue. It's like it's worrisome to think of the fact that people may be posting to make themselves look good and not because they actually care or are personally affected by it. That worries me that people may be posting and also just not doing anything about it, like as well. That's one of my major fears, is that just people think that, oh, racism is going to go away right when this trend on social media. When in reality, like it could be prolonged if we don't actually take action on it. Like just reposting something isn't going to do anything. Like we need to sign petitions, we need to, you know, donate, we need to protest, have conversations with people of color. I just really don't want people to think that systematic racism is just going to go away just because, oh, this trend is now over on Instagram or Snapchat, whatever it is.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. As far as the trend, that's my biggest worry. I see a lot of people post that I know, may not be friends with, just that I follow, that I feel like they're just posting a post. Of course, I don't know their true intentions, but at the same time, you just never know. It's like, why are you saying something now when everything's hit the fan? You know, is it because it's a trend, or do you really feel that way? And then also, my white peers that I hang out with, whether it's their parents or their grandparents, you know, feel away or they agree with the systemic racism, but their children don't. I think children like that have a hard time speaking up to their parents, because it's like some people go as far as to, if you live in my household, you gotta look at things this way. So I've definitely felt that way with friends where, you know, I feel uncomfortable around their parents, but I don't think that their, you know, child feels that way. But then again, I don't really know. So I've been in those awkward situations where it's like, you know, I don't really know if I should go over, you know, and hang out at your house, you know what I'm saying? But their parents feel the same way. Ever since I was little, or at least my dad was a big advocate of it. If I was going to one of my white peers' house, it was like, you know, if he felt some way or if he knew them when they were younger, it was like, I don't know if you should go over there. I don't know if they're going to want you over there. And I didn't really understand why, but now I do. So I think that's a big thing too, is children speaking up to their parents, grandparents, in fear as well is another big issue.
I also would like to speak about when I was at my boyfriend's house, and I forgot how the topic even came up because the Black Lives Matter movement wasn't really prominent at the time. It was like beginning of May or late April. And his grandparents straight up told me that they used to be racist at one point. And like me being in their house for like a few months, I was just like wondering like how they felt about me, like how, and they basically just said that they were racist because that's just how everybody thought back then, that they didn't know it was wrong because everybody like felt that way. Just such a weird concept to me, but it just makes me also wonder like what things are we not doing right just because we're following what social media is telling us.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. One of the things that, and that's one of my fears too, that people are doing this because of perception, how they want to be perceived. They don't ever want to be be perceived as a racist, even though there is systematic racism that goes all the way back to their grandfathers. And so that is embedded into their DNA without them not even knowing. And so when we do bring up these conversations, and the reason why I usually don't even have them with my white friends or the white people that I know, is because I know that at the end of the day, you're going to find some type of way to make it about you. And it's never been about you. It's been about the past and the initial sin of slavery that then transitioned into this systematic racism that, like I said, we can't see it, we can't hear it, we can't smell it, but we sure can feel it. And so the thing that I think that has to happen to make sure that this isn't a trend is to understand, to get to the heart issue. Even those folks that think that they aren't racist, and like, there's no way I'm racist, there's no way. There's some type of minutia deep down that you have, or stereotype of or some type of feeling deep down that when you engage people of color, there's a certain type of attitude that takes on, or a certain way that you act. It could be anything, but it's there. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure is, and I talked to a person that called me, a white person that called me recently, that just said, hey, is there, I'm sorry that this happened. I didn't know you felt like this. Is there anything that I can do? And I'm like, are you saying that because of the situation that just happened with George Floyd? Because you didn't ask me that. I've known you for 7 years. You didn't ask me that before. And so let's not make it about that trend. Let's make it real. And so the only way to make that thing real is to understand that racism is a disease, right? So if racism is a disease, all right, how would you treat a disease, or how would you treat an ailment that you have? Okay. The first thing is, if you don't know that you have a disease, but you know you have something wrong with you, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to research it obsessively. Okay. I'm gonna tell you right now, if I had a spot on my arm, or if I had a spot on my arm and I'm thinking to myself, that's weird, I don't know where that came from, let me figure out what that is. I'm going online, I'm gonna figure out what that spot is. I'm gonna do all types of research. I'm gonna do all types of reading on it until I figure out what it is. Then once I figure what it is, I'm gonna figure out, okay, well, how can I fix this? What do I need to do to get this spot off my arm? And in order for me to do that, I've got to do some more research. I've got to find out what to do. Then I need to figure out if I need to get help, or if I need to go to a doctor. Okay, along that line, I may call one of my friends that may have also had that spot on their arm. And I'm gonna ask them, hey, did you have that spot on your arm? Yeah, this is what I did. But hey, you know what? You might not have all the information. I need to find out for myself so that I can change my mindset, my heart, to figure out how to fix this spot on my arm. And honestly, that is what racism is. It is a spot that you have to deep down go in and research obsessively, understand it, get to know it, figure out how to fix it, and continually work at curing that spot. It's not just going to happen off of a phone call or me calling my black friend and figuring out how do I fix this. No, we can't tell you. Okay, we don't have those. We don't have all the answers, because if we tell you, because we've been protesting for years, okay, our protests fall on dead ears. So we can't tell you that. That needs to be a hard issue with you, finding out what the real issue is within yourself. And then once you do find that out, that is when, you can figure out how to solve this thing within yourself, how to break that system. And it's going to take time. It shouldn't be just a partial trend. It needs to be now. And so for me, that's one of the things that I've always tried to talk with my white friends, my white peers with, is if you really want to talk about this, make sure that you are educating yourself fully and obsessing over it. Because if you're not, then you're not really trying to fix the issue. You are just checking the box. Now, okay, I have a question about how do we fix this? Like how do we go about this? We're talking now. We're using our platform as an advantage to share knowledge and details with people, but how do we continually work at this? How do we make this thing not a trend?
I think it's way more than just posting on social media, because as basically everybody said in the call was, it's more worried about people posting on social media trying to perceive themselves as not being racist. And as to me, I feel like you going out and doing something about it makes way more sense than just making a post on social media. Like, I know, like Amira said, I think it's a couple people I know that I think they're just posting just so we won't think differently about them. But it kind of makes it worse, because I don't know if I'm wrong, but you could tell if they're just posting it just to post it, like they're not doing anything else about it. You don't basically you don't have to post what you're doing outside to do to make change, but I feel like if you know what's right, you should be getting out there and at least signing petitions, at least donating something. It don't have to be much. Making sure a lot of more people's voices are heard, basically. That's my way of, I think we can make a lot of things better, and getting people to understand how we feel, basically. And future decisions like voting, basically. Like, I think people should take voting way more serious than they do. Because honestly, in my opinion, I think the president himself is obviously racist. I don't know if I'm speaking wrong for myself, but in my opinion, I think that's what it is. And we should look way more into stuff rather than just social media, because we don't know the other person we're voting for neither. He might be the same way. We don't know that. We just saying it because we know about the current president we have now. And I feel like we need to get educated, way more educated than we actually are. Because I'm educated, but I'm not educated enough myself. And I'm trying to make a change for that.
I think that at UNCA, we should specifically host PAL events that are mandatory to not only like the student athletes, but just like the staff, faculty, et cetera, all the students, just shining light on like racial injustice issues. And I think that faculty and staff, I think that our police officers, law enforcement personnel should go through some sort of like intensive training or racial screening to eliminate the possibility of racial bias like within these types of systems. Those are things that just like came to mind. I'm sure just like that there's other ways. I think those be really effective.
So the ways that I think we can make changes, I have a multitude of ways I think that we can make changes. I think the first would be to change laws and policies, right? Laws and policies that protect the police when they do they do crimes, or are responsible for crimes against humanity like this. I definitely think we need to change the way unions are able to protect and advocate for police and other people that might be responsible for things that are clearly racist acts. A lot of people have been making the argument that the police should be defunded and that those funds should be incorporated back into the community. And I heard someone say that, defunding doesn't necessarily mean taking away the salaries for all the police or cutting the entire police force. But when you demilitarize the police, because as I'm sure all of you know, the police have, it seems like endless budgets and weapons that the military has that I don't necessarily see the reasons for them having the same weapons as the United States Army. Cut their spending in that regard and make services available to the community using the money that we would use to spend on all of these militarized weapons. And I also think you need to demilitarize the thinking, right? I feel as though a lot of police officers are working in these communities with the mindset that they are in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever other wars might be taking place. And that's not healthy. Because if you go into an area policing thinking that, all these people in this neighborhood are perpetrators or criminals or that type of thing, you're going to react and treat them in much the way that you viewed them. And so I think demilitarizing the thinking, demilitarizing the weapons, defunding them, and incorporating those funds back into the community, changing laws that holds them responsible for, murders or assaults and or whatever other injustices that they might cause is also going to be a big part. Like Doc said, voting is definitely going to be important. I think voting for leaders in our community that are representative of the collective and not just some groups is super important. And I think making sure that we understand that policies and laws aren't stationary. They need to be revamped and revisited very often because things do change. New concerns are always going to arise, and we don't necessarily have the answers all the time. And putting in place laws thinking that that's the ultimate answer is not the answer. So that's it.
I would definitely agree with the voting aspect. There are a lot of people that don't take voting serious at all. And I think also when you're going to vote, like you said, do your research, not just because it's who your family's voting for or it's with your affiliated party, but do your own personal research on what these people stand for, and have a leg to stand on with who you're voting for. I also think that, the cop that murdered George Floyd, it's kind of common sense. He had many red flags. He had many accounts of being aggressive with individuals prior to George Floyd, and he wasn't held accountable for his actions, and that lies on people above him that are in charge of him. But I also feel like I was reading the other day, and Kamani, you can interrupt me if I'm wrong, but having prosecutors that aren't affiliated with protecting these police, like a whole separate, I don't know how to word it, but just a whole separate group of people, of prosecutors that aren't affiliated for protecting these injustices and things like that, putting a policy in place for things like that, I think would be good as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. That's a very good point that you brought up. Definitely having an internal affairs bureau or somebody that is responsible for reviewing police misconduct that is not a part of the police department, or that is not policed by the police department. It makes no sense to have prosecutors and or detectives or internal affairs bureaus that were former, I'd say, for example, NYPD or former Asheville PD, because then you ask them to write up or, punish or criticize their buddies, people that they've been on the force with for 10, 25 years. And obviously that's not going to be fair, right? Because, at the end of the day, they're trying to protect each other. And, they're going to defend each other by saying that we as the public don't necessarily understand all that's associated with being a police officer, and we would react negatively in certain situations. But in a situation like George Floyd, I don't see how anything could have caused several officers to be pressing down on his neck and his back to the point where he is unable to breathe for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So that's another thing. I think that's a really good point. Having prosecutors and investigative bodies that are unbiased and that also understand that everything doesn't require an investigation. We've all seen the video, right? This is my personal view. If we all have already seen the video for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it's very clear to me what is happening in the video, what more needs to be investigated. What more could you say to the family and to the public? What more information needs to be gathered? We've all seen it. We all know what's happening. Whatever you think it might be is clearly not what it is. So, and I think we'd benefit from having separate and distinct prosecutors and internal affairs by, like Amari is saying, because then it would be unbiased. So.
Yeah, I agree with everyone here regarding all those facets. One of the things that, I would think about regarding police reform and is creating more interaction with certain cultures. I feel like there is a scant cross-racial interaction there. Like I don't see them actually engaging into the Black community or understanding and knowing it. And so when you go in there and you go into an area, like you said, as if they're going into a war zone. It's not a war zone. All right, you're going into an area with fathers, with mothers, daughters, and sons. And when you go to these areas, you have to understand how precious life is when dealing with that. And so one of the things that I wrote down for not only just police officers and people of authority, but just the people that are in power, which is white people. A way that we can fix this, because it goes all the way down the line, engaging ongoing self-awareness and understanding yourself. That goes back to the education part that Amir was talking about. Continuing that education. It just doesn't stop once you read one book. And one book that I think to mind that would really help a lot of white people as far as understanding where we come from as Black people or people of color is White Fragility, which really goes down and deep into the subconscious of racism and within white people that they don't even know. And so the thing is we can't change your subconscious. It is up to you to make that conscious decision. Another thing is relationship building. And I'm not talking about the awkward relationship building where you just go up to a Black person and it just needs to be organic. But when you do have those opportunities, work on them and educate yourself on those. And then obviously anti-racism practice. Those are things that I thought that would be a great way to start continuing this thing and making it not just, one move, but a large movement that helps, my daughters when they get older and helps their kids. And so I want it to be long-term. I want it to be generational to work towards equality. Well, I think that's it. I think that's all I got. Matt, you got anything?
I don't. I think that all of your experiences are real, and right off the bat, when Doc was talking about being 8 and being handcuffed and watching his dad being detained for absolutely no reason, I mean, it's affecting when you think of that situation, but also it brings up the point, how is Doc supposed to build a relationship with a policing organization when that's his experience with them? And I think that that's a lot to ask of him. And I think that's a lot to ask of everyone who has those interactions. In this group, if you felt biased from a policing organization, just real quickly, if you would raise your hand. That's everyone but me. And that's, I think, highlights what we're here talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I would be that.
Oh, I was gonna go on a different topic, so go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, how has everyone's experience at UNCA been? As a person of color. I always wondered that because I have my own feelings about it, and I was just wondering what you guys felt about it.
To me, you mean racism wise or just like?
I mean, it could be racism wise, or it could just be your everyday interactions as a person of color. It doesn't necessarily have to be a racist interaction.
But yeah, to me, I guess it's pretty fair at UNCA. I haven't experienced any type of racism myself, so I couldn't sit up here and act like I have. To me, I've been treated very well at the school, in my experience.
Yeah, for me personally, when I went to UNC Asheville, which was, we're almost at a decade now. When I went on my visit there, I saw nothing but white folks, and so that was coming from Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. I just was like, what am I about to get into here? And so my shields were up, and as I started to experience my time at UNCA, like as far as dealing with professors, with other teams, with just the people that go to school there. I never had any situation where I felt, I felt that I was, felt any type of racial tension going on. It just felt natural. It felt good. I mean, I enjoyed my tenure there. And so for me personally, I've never had any, but I'm sure there has been, and, just dealing with it. But for me personally, I was pleasantly surprised after coming on my visit and seeing the campus, and then all of a sudden, actually in going to the school and seeing different.
I would say for myself, I haven't experienced anything as far as like racism at UNC Asheville. Everybody I've been around, whether it's professors, coaches, students, peers, everybody's actually been more open-minded than the people I've been around in my whole life. So I think Asheville, from my experience, the people that I've met are very open-minded and educated, and I haven't experienced anything personally.
Now, if you're talking about going to different places in sports and dealing with it,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Sure. That's a whole different thing, though.
Yeah. If you're talking about that and dealing with, other teams, other crowds, and things of that nature, and fans, or just going to a different hotel, like and staying the night, yeah, we see it. I've actually been in situations where, Coach Biedenbach had to, shut some stuff down because of how people were acting towards us. And so there's been situations in certain types of schools that I've gone to that I've definitely seen it. And it made me actually be thankful for where I went to school and glad that I wasn't a part of that. So, yeah.
To give some context, like, again, I'm from California, which is mostly like a pretty diverse state. And so, like, I will admit, at first it was sort of alienating to be part of a team and conference that was like, that contained very little diversity, because I just wasn't used to that. However, I mean, it didn't really bother me too much because, like, my skin color doesn't really have any tangible value, whether that's like on the track or on the soccer field, because, like, at the end of the day, it's my overall ability and understanding of the game. But I can only imagine what it's like for Clifton, and he's been my only African-American soccer coach other than my dad, who's actually, like, from Nigeria. And I actually researched on this, and there's a total of 528 D1 soccer programs, like men's and women's combined, and there's only 25 Black head coaches in the whole NCAA system. So I can imagine that must be an interesting situation to be in. But as regards to UNCA, I haven't really faced any sort of like racist remarks personally, or interactions, altercations. But,
Yeah, I was just asking, it's good to hear that you guys are feeling comfortable and welcomed at UNCA. I think that's definitely important, and contrary to probably what most of you grew up in. So I'm I'm Jamaican, so I've had the opportunity to live in Jamaica and also in New York. And when I've lived in both, I've lived in uniquely Black spaces where like my interactions with white people were almost limited to none. So coming to UNCA was definitely an eye opener for me. It's like white people really exist. Like I swear to God, I couldn't believe it. You know, um, so it really was a change, and I think like most of you said, you know, it wasn't what I expected. All I knew was I was going to school in the South to run track. I didn't know, you know, if it was going to be a racist setting, what was going to happen, but I definitely felt well received when I got there. So just wanted to make sure that they were continuing to treat you guys well, you know.
And one thing you talked about Coach Cliff, and you know what he means, and I love the fact that I am seeing people of color in leadership positions at UNCA. Obviously, I love to see more of it. As you know, more qualified people like that, and so that's been one thing that I would love to see more of continually. Like I love what Coach says got now. It doesn't have to be coaches, but you know, I might have been a little bit more comfortable on my visits there. Maybe if I saw some leadership there. Only to be honest with you, when I was there, you know, I may have seen one African American professor, and then the rest of the African American folks that were there were either in the Highsmith or in the CAF. And so one of the things that I'd love to see is more color in the leadership positions. And so that was, you know, as far as my experience goes, still a great situation. Was taken aback because of not seeing as many faces like mine, except for in the athletic department. But and I think that's changed a lot. I mean, UNCA is growing regarding that compared to when I was there. I walked the campus, you know, before this whole thing shut down, and I was just like, man, there are Black folks here. I love it. And so, you know, I think we're making a step in the right direction. The next step I'd love to see is leadership positions.
I would like to talk about the fact that systematic racism just isn't like in the justice system. It's also like in the medical field. And I was doing some research, and like African Americans are 40% less likely to receive opioids than their non-Hispanic white counterparts for like acute pain, and that we're dying at 3 times the rate from COVID than our Caucasian counterparts, and in the Navajo Nation, which I actually volunteered there for a project called the Sierra Service Project as a camp counselor, where we built their houses. And it's just talking about how people of color are not properly funded, that more than 30% don't have running water. Like the nearest hospitals are usually like an hour or 2 away. And that basically they have like the 3rd highest capita of COVID rates and COVID death rates in the whole entire world. And our government isn't doing anything about it. In fact, Ireland is the one helping them, not our own country. It's just showing, it's just all people of color are somehow affected systematically by racism.
What I'm hearing you say and what I've heard, my wife has a doctorate in public health, and she's said to me that racism is a public health emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what you're saying, and it's inarguable. You're right.
Right.
Oh, even for college graduates, I think they're like 30%, like they're 30% more likely to receive like 20% less than their white counterparts based on the same job or same type of schooling. And they, like student loans for Black college graduates are a rate 5 times higher than their white counterparts. And I got that quote actually. She's assistant professor at Columbia. I think her name is Judith Scott. But still, that's worrisome to me because I'm trying to go to graduate school and I'm trying to make a life and living for myself. And it's like, if my hard work doesn't mean as much, or my schooling doesn't have as much value as somebody else's, it's just unfair, because it's just very unfair.
I'm gonna touch on that a little bit. And I saw, regarding systematic racism, affect my father, who's a college graduate, and was unable to get a job anywhere. I mean, there was a time frame where, and he's qualified, he's going against guys with the same qualifications, but you know, it's because of how he looks. I remember one time that, you know, there was a situation where he felt like they were scared of him, truly scared of him, because my dad's a big fella. You know, but not only that, is the fear of working with someone like that. Will he be confrontational, things of that nature? But he could not get a job for years. And that really affected me. Like, it really affected me. It affected how I work now. I don't work for anyone. I've got like 3 businesses. I'm not working for anybody. And I'm terrified of it. And a lot of that is because of just seeing my dad struggle, go through those things, and really see him torn down emotionally from it, to a point where he just started his own business. And because he just wasn't able to get anything, even though sometimes he was overqualified, or you know, he just couldn't get anything. And so for me personally, like, you know, after seeing that happen to him, it definitely changed my outlook on how I'm going to go about life, and how I'm going to try my best to take some things out of the equation, and also leave something tangible for my kids, so that they don't ever have to worry about that situation either, my daughters. And if that ever happens, if they ever get in a situation where they can't, and this is what we call generational wealth. Now, it's got to start somewhere. But, you know, if they ever get in a situation where Dad, I need a job, I need something, it's going to be there for them. And so for me, it was leaving something behind for my family that will continue to be built on after I'm gone, for my kids and my kids' kids. And but ultimately, it was the effect of the systematic racism that I saw that happened to my dad, my uncles, my grandfather, and it's how it impacted how I, after I graduated from college, how I wanted to, you know, play my part. Well, Matt, I think we might be out, man.
I found this to be an amazing discussion, and I'm honored to have been present for it. So thanks for having me and inviting me in to share this space and to share this time.